The galaxy was vast, full of strange worlds and countless alien species. Each one believed they were the strongest, the most advanced. Wars had been fought between them, alliances formed, and empires built. But one thing was certain. The galaxy had never seen anything quite like humans. One quiet day, as the stars glittered brightly in the blackness of space, something unusual happened. A ship, unlike any other, entered the borders of an alien sector. It was small, almost insignificant compared to the massive fleets that often patrolled the galaxy. But this ship wasn't like the others. It didn't send out any signals. It didn't announce itself. It just appeared, floating quietly, as if it had been there for a long time. The alien species who controlled this sector were the Draxi, tall, powerful beings known for their advanced technology and ruthless nature. They had conquered many planets and held power over hundreds of systems. They had never encountered a race quite like humans. To them, humans were nothing more than a mystery, a curiosity. At first, the Draxi thought the ship was a mistake. Maybe it had gotten lost, drifting across the galaxy. They had seen ships from other species entering their space before, but they never thought a single ship from a tiny, unknown species would dare to come so close. Some of the Draxi officers laughed, thinking it was a foolish mistake. A human ship. It couldn't possibly be anything important. However, their laughter quickly faded when they realized something strange. The ship was not just drifting. It was heading straight for Draxi space, moving with purpose. It didn't act like a ship lost in space. It was calm, deliberate, and confident. It was almost as if it knew exactly where it was going. The Draxi Council, a group of the highest-ranking officials, gathered to discuss the situation. Each alien species had their own way of dealing with threats. The Draxi were known for being decisive, but this situation was different. They couldn't understand why a human ship, so small, would be heading straight toward them without fear. Most of the time, ships from unknown species would send signals, asking for permission to enter, or at least announce their presence. But not this one. The council members were split. Some believed that the human ship was an act of defiance. Perhaps the humans were testing their strength, trying to provoke the Draxi into action. Others thought it could be a trap, designed to lure them into a trap, where they would be ambushed by a much larger fleet. Why would humans send just one ship? One of the Draxi commanders asked, his voice filled with confusion. They are weak. This is a message, a test. We should respond with force. But not everyone agreed. Another council member, a wise Draxi elder, spoke up. No, she said, her voice calm yet filled with concern. This ship is too quiet. It's not acting like an invasion. It's not attacking. It's waiting, observing. We must understand what it wants before we make any rash decisions. The debate continued for hours. Some wanted to attack, while others urged caution. In the end, they decided to send a scout ship to get a closer look. The decision was made, and the Draxi fleet moved to position itself around the human ship. Meanwhile, the humans aboard their lone vessel were unaware of the growing fear they had inspired. They had no idea that the galaxy was watching, wondering about their every move. To them, it was simple. They were doing what they needed to do. They had a mission, a purpose. The Draxi fleet sent out their scout ship, moving silently through the void toward the human vessel. The ship was small, sleek, and designed to observe without being noticed. It was a master of stealth, perfect for gathering information. The scout moved closer to the human ship, its sensors carefully scanning every inch of the vessel. But what the Draxi scout saw only deepened the mystery. The human ship didn't look like anything the Draxi had encountered before. Its design was simple but elegant. The technology appeared advanced, but not in the same way the Draxi's was. The ship seemed almost alive, as if it were a part of its crew, functioning as one with its human inhabitants. The scout ship's sensors couldn't detect any weapons, nothing to indicate the ship was armed for war. Yet it was impossible to shake the feeling that this ship was more than just a simple transport vessel. The Draxi scout returned to report, and the council listened closely. They were still uncertain. Could this ship be a trick, or was it something far more dangerous than they had imagined? The mystery grew. Why had humanity sent just one ship? What did it want? The answer was still unknown, but one thing was clear. The galaxy had just become a lot more interesting. The Draxi Council convened once again, and this time, the air was thick with tension. The strange human ship still lingered at the edge of their space, silently defying every assumption the Draxi had about power and control. Its presence seemed to haunt the minds of every officer, every strategist in the galaxy. Why had it come? And more importantly, what did it mean? The council room, deep within the heart of Draxi Command, was filled with the most powerful beings in the sector. They were not only leaders, but experts in war, strategy, and diplomacy. Their species had defeated countless other races, their power unmatched. Yet now, they were confronted with an enemy unlike any they had faced before, a single ship from a race they knew little about. It was as if the universe had thrown them a puzzle that no one could solve. "We must act now," shouted one of the younger Draxi officers. His large, imposing figure loomed over the council table. His green skin shimmered with the intensity of his words. "If we wait, we risk showing weakness. If humanity is trying to test us, they need to know that we will not tolerate their challenge. We should attack before they can do anything." The others remained silent. They could see his point. The Draxi had always believed that power came from strength, and strength meant action. If the humans were here to challenge their dominance, the only solution seemed clear: crush them before they had a chance to strike. But then, an elder Draxi named Oran raised his hand. He was the oldest member of the council, with silver scales and piercing eyes that had seen countless battles. His reputation was legendary. Oran had witnessed the fall of many civilizations, and his wisdom was respected by all. "Patience," he said in a calm, measured voice. "We do not know what we are dealing with. Yes, this human ship may seem weak, but its silence speaks volumes. It shows restraint, and that restraint could be a weapon in itself." Oran's words hung in the air like a cloud. The room fell quiet. The younger officers exchanged uncertain glances. They didn't understand. In their minds, silence meant weakness. Silence was an invitation to attack. But Oran was not convinced. "Do not forget," Oran continued, "that no one has ever challenged the Draxi in this way. We do not know the full power of humanity. Their ship is unlike anything we've seen. We must learn more. A single ship may be a message, but it is also a chance for us to understand their true strength." The council shifted uncomfortably. Oran's words were not easily dismissed. But the question remained: how would they understand the human ship without risking their own safety? They had no idea what it could do, or what kind of force humanity could bring. "We could send scouts," suggested another officer, "closer this time, to get a better look at their technology. If we see anything that threatens us, we strike immediately." The idea of sending scouts was agreed upon, but the tension was still there. The aliens knew this was dangerous. The human ship had already shown an ability to avoid detection, to remain silent while the Draxi watched. What if it was hiding something? What if it had weapons that the Draxi could not even imagine? "Why would they send just one ship?" asked the officer who had first suggested an attack. He looked at the council, his mind racing. "It doesn't make sense. If they are strong enough to challenge us, why not bring an entire fleet?" Oran's gaze softened, and he spoke again. "Perhaps they don't need a fleet. Perhaps they are trying to show us something else. Maybe they want us to believe they are weak. But in reality, they could be stronger than we can understand." The room fell into a deep silence as the council considered Oran's words. The thought of facing a race so unlike the others, so strange in their methods, was both intriguing and terrifying. The Draxi had never had to deal with a species that relied on restraint instead of overwhelming force. "We need more information," Oren said finally. "We will send the scouts. But we will not make a decision until we understand exactly what this ship represents." And so it was decided. The Draxi would send out their best scouts, the stealthiest ships in their fleet, to gather information. They would carefully observe the human ship from a distance, watching for any sign of aggression or unusual behavior. The Council would remain in the dark for now, unsure of what the humans truly wanted. But one thing was certain: they would not underestimate them again. As the scouts departed, the Council members looked out into space, their minds filled with uncertainty. The galaxy, it seemed, was changing, and humanity, with its one ship, had become a force they could no longer ignore. The Draxi fleet moved in carefully, their ships hidden in the shadows of nearby planets. They were getting closer to the human ship, their minds filled with both curiosity and fear. It had been several days since the Council had made its decision. The scouts were to observe, learn, and report back. And now, as the human ship floated silently in space, the Draxi were more certain than ever that they were dealing with something they could not fully understand. The human ship, unlike the towering battle cruisers of the Draxi, was small, but it moved with confidence, unbothered by the many alien ships that were now in its orbit. There were no signs of aggression, no weapons visible. It simply drifted, calm and silent. The lead Draxi scout ship approached, moving slowly and quietly, like a shadow in the vastness of space. The scout's sensors were tuned to the highest level, searching for any sign of danger. They would need to learn everything about the human ship, its design, its technology, its purpose, before making any decisions. The closer they got, the more puzzled they became. The human ship seemed simple, almost primitive at first glance. Its exterior was smooth, metallic, with lines that were sleek but not overly advanced in appearance. But the Draxi scouts soon realized that this ship was far more than it seemed. The technology was unlike anything they had encountered. It was as if the ship was alive, reacting to its surroundings, constantly adjusting itself in ways that the Draxi could not explain. "Report," came the voice of the Draxi officer, his tone tense. He stared at the data streaming in from the scout ship's sensors. The numbers made no sense. Everything they had assumed about human technology seemed to be wrong. The scout commander hesitated before answering. "The human ship is not what we expected. It's technology. It's not like any other species in the galaxy. There are no visible weapons, no shields, no signs of defensive systems. But the way it moves, it's as if it anticipates our every move. It's almost too perfect." The officer frowned. "Explain." The scout commander continued, his voice laced with uncertainty. "It doesn't seem to need any external power sources. Its engines are unlike any we've seen before, smaller, yet far more efficient. Its propulsion system is far beyond our understanding, and its surface, it seems to be alive. There are subtle shifts, like it's responding to our presence." A silence fell over the Draxi officers as they processed this new information. If the human ship didn't need the same systems that every other race used, what did that mean? How was it able to function? And most importantly, if it had no visible weapons or defense systems, what was protecting it? Meanwhile, on board the human ship, things were moving forward as usual. The humans didn't know they were being watched. Their crew went about their work, maintaining the ship, monitoring the stars. To them, everything was normal. They had a mission. They were moving forward, one step at a time, toward whatever lay ahead. The Draxi scout ship moved closer, preparing to send out a probe to get even more detailed scans of the human ship's technology. But before they could make their move, something unexpected happened. The human ship, which had been so quiet and still for so long, suddenly emitted a strange pulse of energy. It wasn't a weapon, but it was powerful. The energy wave pushed outward, forcing the Draxi scout ship to retreat. The Draxi officers watching the scene from their command center were startled. "What is that?" one officer asked. "A defense mechanism." "It doesn't look like a defense mechanism," the scout commander replied. "It's almost like a signal." But to what? The energy pulse seemed to ripple through space, creating a field that pushed away the Draxi scout ships, like a warning. The pulse wasn't aimed directly at them, but it was powerful enough to make them think twice. "We've seen nothing like this before," said Oran, the elder Draxi who had warned the council before. "This is not an attack. It is a message, and it's clear. The humans are not afraid." The mystery only deepened. The humans had not fired a single shot, yet the power of their ship was undeniable. The Draxi could not deny it any longer. This was no ordinary ship. This was something beyond their understanding. The decision was made. The scout ships pulled back, returning to the Draxi fleet to report on what they had discovered. But the human ship, calm and silent, remained in place. It had sent its message, and now the Draxi had to decide how to respond. In the heart of the Draxi command center, the council members waited for the scout's report. Oren stood at the back of the room, watching the stars outside the window, lost in thought. He knew that the universe was about to change. The Draxi might have been the most powerful race in the galaxy, but they were facing a new challenge now. And this time, they weren't sure who would win. The Draxi fleet remained at a safe distance, watching the human ship from afar. They had seen the strange pulse of energy, and it had left them all shaken. No one had expected it. There were no visible weapons, no shields, no signs of defense. Yet the human ship had proven that it was no ordinary vessel. The council, still divided on how to approach the situation, called for a special meeting. Oran, the wise elder, stood at the front of the room, watching the large holographic display showing the human ship hovering calmly in space. The ship was still there, just as silent and still as before. "We have underestimated them," Oren said, his voice low but full of certainty. "This is not a race that relies on force alone. There is something else at play here, something beyond our understanding." The other council members exchanged uneasy glances. Their confidence was shaken. They had expected an easy victory if the humans were foolish enough to challenge them, but now they were faced with a problem they didn't know how to solve. One of the younger Draxi officers, impatient and eager to act, spoke up. "We've been watching for too long. We know that ship is dangerous. It has some kind of power we can't explain. We need to act before it's too late." But Oran raised his hand, silencing him. "No," he said firmly. "We will not act without knowing the full truth. We do not attack out of fear. We must understand what we're dealing with." Back outside the safety of their command room, the Draxi scouts were still monitoring the human ship. They had pulled back after the strange energy pulse, but were now gathering more information. They sent another probe closer, carefully monitoring its movements. The ship was still quiet, still unmoving, but the scouts noticed something strange. The closer they got, the harder it became to track the ship's movements. The human vessel didn't behave like any other ship. It didn't follow predictable patterns. One moment it was in one place, and the next it had shifted slightly, as if it was constantly adjusting to its surroundings. The Draxi ship's sensors struggled to lock onto it. No matter how much they adjusted their tracking systems, they couldn't get an accurate reading. "It's almost like the ship is blending with the environment," one of the scout officers said, his voice filled with disbelief. "Every time we get close, it moves. It's too fast." The other scouts were stunned. How could a ship move like this without showing any obvious signs of propulsion or movement? The only thing that was clear was that the human ship wasn't being controlled in the way they understood. The Draxi were used to power, to force. The human ship seemed to be using something entirely different. Back on the Draxi command station, Oren listened intently as the scout reports came in. He didn't need to hear more. He had already come to a conclusion. He looked at the younger officers, who were still eager to strike. "We are facing an unseen force," Oren said softly. "This ship doesn't need to show its power. Its power is in how it adapts, how it hides, how it remains beyond our reach. It's not just a machine. It is a force we cannot control." The younger officer frowned. "But what does that mean? Are we supposed to just wait and watch while they test us? If they wanted to attack, they could have done it by now." Oran shook his head. "No, they do not need to attack. Not yet. They are showing us their strength in a way that no one else has ever done before. And that, I believe, is the true message they are sending." A quiet realization began to spread through the room. The Draxi had always believed that power meant destruction, that strength meant overwhelming force. But the humans were showing them something different. The human ship was not about force. It was about control, about patience, about making the galaxy question its own ideas of power. Out in space, the human ship continued to move, still unbothered by the Draxi fleet hovering at a distance. The humans knew they were being watched, but they did nothing to provoke the aliens. Their ship remained quiet, almost peaceful, as if it were waiting for something to happen. The Draxi still didn't understand it. Suddenly, the human ship did something that no one expected. It began to shift, slowly, almost imperceptibly. The ship turned. It didn't move in any obvious way, but its orientation changed. A small adjustment in the way it faced the Draxi fleet. There was no warning, no signal, just a change. But it was enough to make the Draxi fleet pause. For the first time, the Draxi felt a cold, uneasy fear. They didn't know what the human ship was doing, but it was clear that the humans had control over the situation. The human ship wasn't just a vessel. It was a symbol of something far greater, a force they couldn't see, a strength they couldn't fight. The scouts reported back to the council. "They've moved," one of the officers said, his voice filled with uncertainty. "But it's not an attack. It's a message." Oren stood at the front of the room. His eyes narrowed. He knew now what the humans were trying to say. The Draxi had never faced a species like this before, and they didn't know how to respond. The galaxy was changing. The Draxi had once been the rulers, the strongest race in the galaxy. But now, they were facing a force that they could not see, a power they could not control. And the worst part was, they didn't even know how it worked. The mystery of the human ship deepened, and the Draxi realized that they were no longer in control of the situation. The universe had just shifted, and they were unsure of what came next. The Draxi fleet hovered at the edge of their space, still watching the human ship. Days had passed since the mysterious energy pulse, and the silence between the two forces had grown thicker. The human vessel had not moved aggressively. It didn't send any more signals. It simply existed in the vastness of space, waiting. The Draxi could not ignore it. Every officer in the fleet, every member of the council, felt the weight of the unknown pressing in on them. What did this human ship want? Why was it here? It was like an invisible force, drawing their attention, challenging their power without ever lifting a finger. And the worst part was, they couldn't do anything about it. Oran, the elder Draxi, paced quietly inside the command room. His silver scales reflected the dim light of the holographic display, showing the human ship from every angle. It was still there, almost as if it had been waiting for the Draxi to make their move. The strange pulse had disappeared, but the tension remained. "We have to understand them," Oren said, his voice filled with the certainty of someone who had seen many battles in his time. "This ship, it's not about power. It's not about force. It's something else." A young officer standing nearby shook his head. "But they've been here for so long, Oran. The longer we wait, the more dangerous they become. What if they're planning something? What if they're just waiting for the right moment to strike?" Oren turned toward him, his eyes sharp. "The longer we wait, the more we learn. If they wanted to strike, they would have done it already. We have to stop thinking like warriors. They are showing us something different, something we do not understand. And that, my friend, is the true power of humanity." The young officer stared at the display, his thoughts racing. He couldn't deny that the human ship was puzzling. It wasn't like anything they had ever encountered. The Draxi had always used strength and fear to control others, to assert dominance. But the humans were doing something entirely different. They weren't fighting. They weren't even speaking. They were simply existing, waiting, and somehow, that was enough to keep the Draxi on edge. Far away, aboard the human ship, things were just as quiet. The crew had grown accustomed to the stillness. They knew the Draxi were out there, watching them. They didn't need to engage. They had no reason to. Their mission wasn't about fighting. It was about showing the galaxy that humans could stand on their own. They didn't need to rely on power, on strength, or on fear. They simply needed to show their resolve. Captain Aiden Carter stood at the helm of the ship, staring out into the endless expanse of space. His eyes narrowed as he thought about the Draxi fleet. He knew the aliens were watching, waiting for him to make the first move. But Aiden wasn't about to rush. His crew was ready. But this wasn't a battle. This was a message. And humanity's message wasn't going to be one of war. It was one of endurance. "We've been here for days, Captain," Lieutenant Harris said, standing beside him. "Do you think the Draxi are waiting for us to make the first move?" Aiden nodded slowly. "They're waiting for us to show our cards. But we don't have to. We've shown them what they need to see. We don't need to fight to prove ourselves. We're here, and we're not leaving." Harris glanced over at the communications officer, who was still monitoring the Draxi fleet. "Do you think they're scared, Captain?" Aiden didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned back to the view of the stars. His face was calm, but there was a fire in his eyes. Fear? No. The Draxi may be uncertain, but they're not scared. They're trying to figure us out. They don't understand us, and that's what's making them hesitate. But fear doesn't matter. Resolve does. The words seemed to settle into the silence of the ship. Humanity wasn't here to conquer or destroy. They were here to show that they could endure, that they could survive, and that they would not back down. The Draxi might be the strongest empire in the galaxy, but humanity had something they could never understand: a quiet, unshakable resolve. Back aboard the Draxi command station, Oran received the latest scout reports. They showed the same thing. The human ship was still there, unmoving. The Draxi had tried everything they could to provoke a response, to force the humans to reveal their true intentions, but nothing had worked. The human ship was just waiting. "Why do they wait?" one of the council members asked. "If they are strong, why don't they show it?" Oren stared at the screen, deep in thought. Strength is not always shown in action. Sometimes it is shown in patience, in restraint. These humans have been here for days without firing a shot, without showing any signs of aggression. They have nothing to prove. That is their power. The council was silent as Oran's words sank in. The Draxi were used to fighting, to dominating. But this human ship, this single vessel, had shown them something they hadn't expected: a power in simply enduring. The Draxi had always believed that strength meant attack, that power meant destruction. But the humans had demonstrated that strength could also mean standing still, holding your ground, and refusing to back down. Oran looked at the council, and finally spoke. "This is the truth of human resolve. It is not in their weapons. It is not in their technology. It is in their will to endure. We must respect that." For the first time, the Draxi Council began to realize that they were not the only force in the galaxy. The humans, with their quiet strength and unwavering resolve, had shown them that power could come in many forms, and this truth would change everything. The Draxi fleet had been watching for days, still unsure of how to approach the human ship. What started as a strange encounter was slowly becoming something much larger. The humans hadn't attacked, hadn't shown any signs of aggression. Instead, they simply existed in space, quiet and still, yet undeniably present. It was like they were waiting for the Draxi to act. But what did it all mean? In the command room, Oren stood by the holographic display, his sharp eyes scanning the data. The human ship was still in position, unmoving. Every scout report showed the same thing. The human ship was waiting, calm, silent. And yet, its presence was more powerful than anything the Draxi had ever experienced. "Why don't they act?" asked a younger officer, his voice tinged with frustration. "What do they want from us? We've given them enough time." Oran's expression softened. He understood the impatience. The Draxi were warriors. They relied on action, on strength, on power. This waiting, this stillness, was foreign to them. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that the humans were not showing weakness. No, they were showing something far greater. They were showing patience, resilience, a strength that didn't need to be displayed in battle. "They are not waiting for us to attack," Oren said, his voice steady. "They are waiting for us to see them, to understand them." The young officer frowned. "Understand them? How can we understand them if they don't speak, if they don't even make a move?" Oren turned to him, his eyes piercing. "That's exactly the point. The humans have shown us that power is not just about action. It is about patience, about standing firm when others expect you to fall. We must learn from this." Meanwhile, aboard the human ship, the crew remained just as calm. Captain Aiden Carter sat in his chair, watching the stars outside the window. The Draxi were still out there, waiting. But he didn't feel fear. He didn't feel pressure. The mission had never been about defeating the Draxi or proving superiority. It was about sending a message that humanity could stand on its own, that they didn't need to follow the same rules as other species. Lieutenant Harris walked up beside him, his expression serious. "Captain, the Draxi fleet is still watching. We've been here for almost a week now. Do you think they'll do anything?" Aiden took a deep breath, looking out at the stars. "They'll do what they think they must, but they don't understand us. Not yet." Harris seemed puzzled. "We're not showing them any aggression. Why won't they just leave us alone?" Aiden smiled slightly. "Because they're not sure what we are. They can't predict us. They've never met anyone like us, and that's what makes them hesitate." The crew, though anxious at times, had grown used to the stillness. They didn't need to do anything dramatic. They had made their point. The human ship had stayed in place, silent but confident, not reacting to the Draxi's every move. It was a new kind of strength, a strength that didn't need to dominate or conquer. A strength that simply endured. Back in the Draxi command room, Oren continued to observe the human ship. He wasn't alone in his thoughts anymore. Some of the council members were starting to come around to his way of thinking. The young officer who had spoken before was deep in thought, his expression changing as he processed Oran's words. "Could it be?" The officer muttered to himself. "Are they teaching us something?" Oran nodded, almost to himself. "Yes. This is not the battle we thought it would be. The humans have shown us a different kind of power. And in doing so, they've forced us to question everything we know about strength." One by one, the other council members began to speak. "We've always believed that to win, you must fight. But maybe there's another way," one of them said. "Yes," Oran replied. "The humans are showing us that real strength is not about fighting. It is about standing your ground, about having the resolve to hold firm even when the odds are against you. They are not here to fight us. They are here to show us that they don't need to." The discussion in the council room grew quieter, more thoughtful. The Draxi had always been the strongest force in the galaxy. They had conquered worlds, dominated other races. But the humans were different. They weren't trying to conquer anyone. They didn't need to. The message they sent was simple. Humanity didn't need to dominate or destroy to survive. They could simply exist, endure, and still make their mark on the universe. Out in space, the human ship remained unchanged. The Draxi fleet, once sure of their power, now found themselves at a crossroads. The human ship hadn't fired a shot. It hadn't raised any weapons. But it had shown them something far more powerful: the ability to stand still, to endure without showing fear, without showing weakness. It had shown them that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is nothing at all. For the first time in a long time, the Draxi were forced to reconsider everything they had ever believed. The universe was bigger, more complicated than they had thought, and humanity, with its quiet resolve, had opened their eyes to a truth they hadn't been ready for. The silence in space was overwhelming. For days, the human ship had been the only thing the Draxi fleet could focus on. The once feared aliens, proud of their strength and domination, now found themselves questioning everything. The human ship had not attacked, not provoked. It simply stood still, unwavering, as if it were a stone in the middle of a vast ocean. In the Draxi command room, Orin stood quietly, watching the still image of the human vessel. His mind had been racing for days, trying to understand what the humans were showing them. The council members were growing restless, but Orin knew this was more than just a simple standoff. This was a moment of change. "We have watched long enough." One of the younger council members finally spoke, breaking the silence. "If they will not fight, then we must make the first move. We cannot wait forever." Orin turned to face him, his expression calm but firm. "It is not about fighting. We are not dealing with a threat that we can destroy. We are dealing with something else. The humans have shown us a different kind of power, one we don't understand yet." "Then what do we do?" the officer asked. "Do we just stand here, watching them forever?" Orin paused for a long moment, his gaze never leaving the human ship. "No, we have to change. We have to adapt to what we are seeing. And that starts with understanding that power doesn't always come from force." The younger officer was quiet, but the words seemed to sink in. One by one, the other council members began to nod in agreement. The idea that the humans were using something other than brute force was slowly taking root in their minds. Meanwhile, on the human ship, Captain Aiden Carter stood in the command center, staring out at the vastness of space. The Draxi fleet was still there, watching, but there was no movement, no attack. The tension had grown, but Aiden had learned to ignore it. This was the plan all along. "We've made our point, haven't we?" Lieutenant Harris said, stepping up beside him. "They'd been watching us for a week, and still no action. It's clear they don't know what to make of us." Aiden turned to him with a slight smile. "Exactly. The Draxi are used to taking control, forcing their way. They've never encountered a species that isn't willing to fight back. But that's what makes us different. We don't need to fight to prove who we are." Harris nodded slowly, understanding. "So, we just wait." Aiden's smile faded slightly, replaced by a more serious look. "No, we don't just wait. We are showing them a different way to be strong. A way that doesn't rely on destruction or fear." In the Draxi fleet, the mood was shifting. The once confident warriors were beginning to question their own beliefs. Orin knew that this was no longer just about the human ship. This was about something much bigger. The galaxy was changing, and the Draxi could no longer be the rulers they once were. They would have to adapt. They would have to learn from the humans. "We must reach out to them," Orin said quietly, his voice carrying through the council room. "We have watched them long enough. It is time for us to understand their message." The council members exchanged uncertain glances, but the majority nodded in agreement. The fear of the unknown had gripped them long enough. It was time to take action, but not in the way they had originally planned. This was not a battle to be won with weapons. It was a new kind of challenge, one that required understanding and patience. With a sense of finality, Orin stood tall. "Prepare a message. We will open communication with the humans. We will find a way to understand them." Back on the human ship, the crew gathered around the communication console as a signal from the Draxi fleet came through. It was unexpected, but it was not a threat. It was an invitation. Captain Aiden Carter stood at the front, listening to the transmission. The Draxi were reaching out. For the first time since the encounter began, the humans were about to speak directly to the Draxi leaders. The tension was thick, but Aiden remained calm. "They're making the first move," Harris whispered, his voice filled with wonder. "I think they're ready to talk." Aiden nodded. "Let's see what they have to say." The message from the Draxi fleet was clear. They wanted to understand. They had been watching, analyzing the human ship, and they had come to a conclusion. The Draxi were no longer sure of their own place in the galaxy. The power they had once relied on was no longer enough. They needed to change, and they needed to learn. The words were simple but powerful. The Draxi were ready to listen. They were ready to learn from the humans. Captain Aiden Carter took a deep breath, then turned to his crew. "This is it. A new era is beginning." As the human ship prepared to respond, there was a sense of unity and purpose that filled the room. The humans had shown the galaxy that strength could come in many forms. And now, the Draxi were ready to listen. The galaxy was no longer divided by fear and power. It was changing, and the future was wide open.